Better get her audio connected. So when we take the roll call, okay, she's connected. So I'm ready to start. You ready? Who am I getting the direction from on this one? Director Harding, are you ready to start?
I am if you are.
Okay, so I'm going to call the regular meeting of the Historical Commission to order at 7:02. Today's date is June 16th, 2021. If we can get a roll call of those in attendance.
Sure, I'll do that. Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Klinger.
Absent-minded, but here.
Commissioner Warstadt.
Here.
Commissioner Zaremski. Commissioner Russell.
Here.
Commissioner Pepper. Commissioner Fernandez. And Chair Morocco.
Here, and I think Commissioner Zaremski waved her hand. So we do have a quorum, and we'll get started with our salute to the flag, and Commissioner Klinger graciously volunteered to lead us in that.
Do we stand up or? Okay. I pledge allegiance
To the
to the
flag
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Klinger. The next thing is I have some introductory comments, as I've done at the past meetings. Wanted to state the purpose of this commission meeting so that it's clear. Our commission is charged with investigating, maintaining, and cataloging all historical information, documents, records, and pictures that would be of general interest to the city and its citizens. We compile records and recordings to promote the keeping of a historical record of the city in narrative form, to be an advisory body, and to perform volunteer services at the Redondo Beach Historical Museum. That's our purpose, and now I'd like to introduce our new Director of Community Services, Cameron Harding. Would you introduce yourself and share some words of wisdom?
Well, I don't know if I have wisdom, but I can do the introductory part. Thank you, Chair. Cameron Harding, been with the city now for about 3 weeks. Prior to Redondo Beach, I was Director of Community Services in Cypress, City of Cypress, down in Orange County. Prior to that, spent 6 years as director in the city of Lomita. And prior to that, spent almost 9 years in the city of Manhattan Beach. Have lived locally in the South Bay for better part of 20 years. Have a young family here, wife and 4.5-year-old, and just thrilled to be able to work in the same community that I live. And very excited to work with this commission, and looking forward to getting to know all of you. So thank you for the welcome, and I'll turn it back over to Chair Morocco.
Thank you very much, Director Harding. I noticed our city attorney, Mike Webb, is on the line, and we're actually the part where we approved the order agenda. If you need us to move you up in the order, now's a good time to speak up about it. Otherwise, I think it'll take about 10 minutes before we get to where you are.
You've got me for the evening. So, although I apologize for the casual dress. I was in a suit earlier. It's just way too hot. And then I see you were in a suit and tie. So now I feel bad about it for not.
Lord, because of you.
Through it.
I figured you were dressed up yesterday. You dressed up again today. So I dressed up for you. Okay. So then, is there a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
Motion to approve order of agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, that would be Commissioner Russell. I will, since we're having audio stuff with Commissioner Zaremski, if you just wave really fast, then I will at least know that you're acknowledging it. Are there any objections to approving the order of the agenda? Okay, hearing none, then we're moving on to the next item on the agenda, the blue folder items. Director Harding or former Director Koike, are there any blue folder items?
No blue folder items this evening.
Okay, great. So now we go to the consent calendar. These are matters that we'll go through, and here is one whole matter. Are there any public comments on the consent calendar at all?
There are no public comments for the consent calendar.
Okay. So we have 4 items on the consent calendar. One of them is the affidavit for posting. The second one is the approval of the April 21, 2021 minutes. The third is the museum donation fund report. And the fourth is the Albert Pierres Mendez moment of Redondo Beach history. Is there any commissioner that wishes to pull an item off the consent calendar? Okay, hearing none. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar, items F1, F2, F3, and F4?
Motion to approve the consent calendar, F1 through F4.
Okay, that's Commissioner Russell. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so it's moved by Commissioner Russell, seconded by Commissioner Zaremski. Any objections to approving the consent calendar? Okay, hearing none, then our consent calendar is approved. And we now move to excluded consent calendar items. And I don't believe there are anything that's been excluded. So we'll move beyond that to the next item, which is the public participation on non-agenda items. And this section is intended to provide public members with an opportunity to comment on any subject that does not appear on our agenda for action. This section is limited to 30 minutes. Each speaker will be afforded 3 minutes to address the commission. Each speaker will be permitted to speak only once. Written requests, if any, will be considered first under this section. So Director Harding or former Director Koike, are there any public comments or participation, people wanting to participate in our meeting?
I didn't receive any. City Clerk, did we receive any e-comments?
We don't have any e-comments, and we also don't have anyone on attendees. So there are no public comments on non-agenda items.
Okay. Next item is items continued from previous agendas. The Brown Act training is actually should have been there, but we have it as the next item anyway. So I don't think there's anything else from previous agendas. So we will move on through item I and move on to item J, items for discussion prior to action. And we've been graciously visited by our city attorney to give our newer members some Brown Act training. So I'm going to turn over this meeting to City Attorney Michael Webb.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman. I've been with the city a little longer than Cameron. I just realized I'm started my 27th plus year with the city and 16 plus as city attorney. And I looked, and last time I gave a presentation to this commission was 2 years ago. Obviously, last year there were mitigating circumstances that were starting to come out of. And I'm going to share my screen. If you'll allow me to. Let's see. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And so this is modified Brown Act presentation that wasn't put together by me. It was put together by the district attorney's office. And we'll talk a little bit about the Brown Act and how it's changed over time. And the Brown Act is actually named after a former state assemblyman and appellate court judge, and reporters play a theme throughout all of it. So they came up with the Brown Act in response to a series of articles in the San Francisco Chronicle about how cities were having secret meetings, in advance of the actual council meeting and ironing out everything. And the actual council meeting was more of a show. And, legend has it back in the day that there are certain restaurants where Torrance or Redondo Beach councils would act. And it was clear that the intent of the law is, as much as possible, to have the public have access and participate in the decision-making of the various boards and the legislative bodies, and have a meaningful opportunity to participate. If you watched any council meeting, you can see how if people turn out in force, either for an idea or against an idea, that can have a very real and very meaningful impact on the decisions that are made. And I think it's really important at the local level because, I think it was Jefferson that said the government's best, which is closest to the people. And you can see, although, one person can have difficulty affecting a state as big as California or the country, one person can, in a very real way, have an impact on local decisions that matter the most. And so I think it's a lot of bodies. The city relies on the commission to provide them good advice, because you have people from every part of the city and you have people with different backgrounds, and you're to bring that experience to provide to your roles and to provide meaningful advice to the council. But the way people, the efficient way that people manage their affairs in business or in personal lives are very different than what you're allowed to do with the commission. And so this is the single unchanged, provision that's in one sentence. It's, all meetings of a legislative body of a local agency shall be open and public, and all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting of the legislative body, and they have certain exceptions. And I won't go into the exceptions because they won't apply to this body, but they're, what the council can do, what we can talk about in closed session. And we're very, very committed and very specific about making certain we can go, that we're permitted, we're fully within one of those exceptions. I will say in the 16 plus years, we haven't had any enforcement letters from the district attorney. We haven't had any lawsuits. You can read the papers where many of our local neighboring cities have not been so successful. And I think that's a credit to all the members who've been mayor, the members of the commissions that have been appointed, and the city council people that I've served with. Although they disagree on many policy issues, they're all committed to, sometimes frustrated with, but they're all committed to this. We had one former council person who said, we operate at the speed of democracy. And that may not be correct, but it's designed to protect the public interest. So, if it has to mean, if it has to be every meeting of a legislative body. So we're going to go through what is a legislative body and what is a meeting within the Brown Act. And basically it covers every type of local body for all practical purposes. If the city manager appoints a commission or appoints a task force, that can sometimes not be a Brown Act committee, because that committee is just advising them. And also, meeting doesn't mean, as you can see with this, you don't have to be all in the same place, and it doesn't have to be all at the same time. And so technology has brought great openness in some ways to public meetings, but it's also presented challenges. And any form of communication or device by which a majority of the legislative body develops a collective concurrence as to the action to be taken. And that doesn't mean they agree, that just means they discuss it. and we'll go through that. Here's a spoiler: don't ever use reply all. So that's just a fast rule. Reply all is not our friend when it comes to the Brown Act. And it's not only emails, because if a member of a member of the community emails all of you and brings up something within your area of responsibility that Chairman Ronco did a great job of reading what your area of responsibility is. And if one of you hits reply all, yeah, I think that's a great idea. Or, well, it would be good, but if you thought of that, you've already committed a Brown Act violation, because you've communicated to a majority of in that case, it may be all of you, what your opinion is. So you've had a mini discussion of what your opinion is on something within your jurisdiction, within your area of responsibility. And so that's why, reply all is not your friend. And you can have chat rooms, or you can have, social media. And so you have to be very careful that you don't inadvertently violate the Brown Act. The Brown Act is construed, and in some council members have in the past wanted to find ways to get things done more quickly. But the problem is the Attorney General and prosecutors have, they broadly construe the Brown Act. And when I was president of the County Prosecutors Association, I served 4 terms, and that's made up of the district attorney and the heads of the 10 offices that prosecute state misdemeanors in LA County. I created with Steve Cooley a presentation that we offered, and we did that seminar a couple of different times to all school boards, all city councils, all Brown Act legislative bodies, because I noticed that in the city attorney materials I had read, it was all about, well, how can we find a way around that? What's an exception? And in the prosecutor materials that I'd seen, it was all about, they really have to have a narrow exception. We're going to interpreted this broadly, and that put them on a clash course. And so we wanted to make certain that they knew that prosecutors weren't viewing it the same way that perhaps a lot of outside firms that represented cities. Now, it's only in the subject matter within the subject that relates to your business. And so you can have meetings where a majority of you are present. You can go to fundraisers, you can go to other meetings, you can go to council meetings, but you just can't discuss things within the historical commission's authority while you're at those meetings. So you have quorum is required to conduct business in public meetings. That's 4 of you, since it's a 7-member commission. Now, it can be any permanent or temporary commission, committee, board, or other body of a local agency, including standing committees, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, that's fixed by some formal action in the legislative body. It's not an advisory committee if less than a quorum of the legislative body and there are no outsiders. In other words, it's you. But I would tell you to look at your standing committees, because if it's a permanent standing committee, or your subcommittees, and I did not pull that item, if it's a subcommittee, if it's a long-standing subcommittee, that can take on the appearance or qualities of a standing committee. So it's better to appoint a subcommittee to deal with a specific issue for a time-limited sense, or you just conduct the standing committee within the requirements of the Brown Act. So when we talked about who it covers, and then I'll talk about frequent inadvertent violations that occur. A meeting is a majority of the members, in your case 4, to hear, discuss, or deliberate upon any item which is within the subject matter jurisdiction. So a lot of times people will say, well, even if it happened, we didn't make a decision. It doesn't matter. If you're discussing it, that has to happen where the public can influence that communication. There's even an AG opinion where emails were going back and forth between council members, and then they would subsequently post it on the city website, and they said, no, that can't replace having the public have an opportunity to influence the discussions while they're going on. As I mentioned, it can be any technology, direct communication, but it can also be through intermediaries. And we'll talk about a hub and spoke, which is a typical type of inadvertent communication, and that would be through an intermediary. So as I mentioned, you don't even have to be at the same meeting, same place for a Brown Act. Individual contacts or conversations, it's not a problem. Attendance of members at any of these events or meetings aren't a problem if you're not discussing your business within that meeting. I often advise commission members that want to attend, say, city council meetings where they may have agendized an item within your scope or a recommendation from you. Generally don't have 4 of you sit in the same place, because it can give the appearance. It's not technically a violation, but it can give the appearance of a violation. So again, that's okay as long as you're not talking about the majority. So the serial meeting there are 2 types, and one is Commissioner A contacts Commissioner B contacts C, and C contacts D. So if you have 4 commissioners who have interacted on the same item, same type subject that is within your jurisdiction, then a quorum has been involved. And even if they disagree, you've had discussions. And so, you'll hear the term Brown Act buddy from the council, and that's just a term that I've seen nowhere else but Redondo Beach, but it's an effective way of saying I can only talk to one, because if I talk to more than one, it's a majority of the council. You can have 2 Brown Act buddies as long as you don't interact with any of the other committee members. The other type of interaction, it can be a hub and spoke, and that can be any person outside. It can be a staff member. It can be a member of the community, where they go to you and say, we really want to do this at the Morale House. I think it's a great idea. And by the way, 3 of the commissioners have already said they're in favor of it, commissioners A, B, and C. And so you're the deciding vote, we can go for it. Well, that's a Brown Act violation, because the 4th one is aware, if the person's telling the truth, of the other 3. And so you just have to have those conversations and just say, look, you can't tell me what if you've talked to any of the commissioners, you just can't tell me what they said. Same thing with a staff member in some cities where they said, okay, well, 2 people are in favor of it. If you want to do it, we'll recommend it. That also would be a hub and spoke violation. Just sort of background, there are 3 types of meetings. I'm going to go through this quickly. A regular meeting, which is your meeting, and your next meeting, I think, is in August. You're on an every other month schedule at this point. Is that correct? Yeah. So that's your regular meeting. Special meeting is something that can be called by the presiding officer or a majority of you. And it's something where, it doesn't have to be emergency. You see it occasionally with the mayor and council. where we needed to get some item done before our next regular meeting. And only with the pandemic have we had emergency meetings. And so it's really only the first one that applies. The rules are slightly different for each of them, and notify my office if you're going to have a special meeting so we can advise you on the special rules that apply. The city clerk takes care of making certain the notice goes out, making certain it's out in advance of 72 hours of your meeting. The one thing that I would like to say is often people will come up and talk to you on non-agenda items on something within your subject matter jurisdiction. I'll give one example from a long time ago. I think it was Parks and Rec Commission, and someone came up and was talking about, and I don't remember the specific issue, but it had to do with basketball hoops, and it may have been noise or it may have been the hours, and they wanted to be responsive, like, we've heard you, and so they start talking about that issue. Well, they can't talk about it. They can have a very brief response, but that's it. And I even you hear the mayor and he'll just say, we can't talk about you. Somebody can come up and say something awful about the mayor or one of the other council people, and the mayor or the other council people think it's entirely false, but he'll say, we can't talk about it during this agenda item. It's best just not to touch any item that's not agendized. Now, there's an exception, and that is, and I would encourage you to use it. Someone comes up to you and says they think you should talk about, such and such. At the you can direct staff to place the matter on a future agenda, and you can have a vote to place it on your agenda, and that's not a violation of the Brown Act. It's a specific exception. Now, you can't get into a big debate about why it's a good idea. Well, I don't want to put it on the agenda because I'm against it for reasons A, B, C, and D. Well, I do want to put it in because I think it's a great reason for A, B, C, and D. Well, all of a sudden you're having a discussion. So you just have, a motion to direct them, and then you would have a vote. And you don't have to have someone agendize it. You don't have to have some member of the public to spur this. It's the way that you as a commission retain control over your agenda. Now, you have to make certain it's within your subject matter jurisdiction, and you have to be mindful of not, if it's going to create a great stress on staff, Cameron's just here. I don't want Cameron to go fleeing, so don't continue to. But I'd like for next meeting, the city attorney said we'd like 5 reports on this and have them be big comprehensive reports. That wouldn't be a very efficient thing. But you can, often the debate is between staff controlling the agenda and you controlling the agenda, and you control the agenda, but staff controls their workload. And so just be respectful and mindful of that with each other. But you're the commissioners, and we value and need your input. Everyone can attend. You can't require them to identify them. We often will say, state your name and place of residence. And if they volunteer, that's totally fine, because often it will matter more if they're a Redondo resident, and the record would be good to have it on there, but we can't require it. Okay, I've gone over that. The one thing I would say, make certain sometimes inadvertently, it's really hard during Zoom meetings, and I think Commissioner Morocco does a fabulous job. He just started with public comments. Often the council will start with council comments, And that's not wrong, but you can see sometimes that they'll forget to ask for public comment. And either I or the city clerk will have to weigh in and say, okay, we haven't had public comment. And they have a right to do so before you take any action, not afterwards. Not, I think that decision you just made was awful, doesn't cut it. It has to be before or during consideration of the item. Agency can regulate time, place, and manner of comments, such as a 3-minute limit. You can extend it at your discretion, but you can't do so on the basis of content. So there was, while I worked for the city, but before I was city attorney, there was a lawsuit because a previous mayor took offense at a comment that someone had made and cut him off. And it was based on the content of his speech. And just because it may be offensive, but it wasn't threatening, it wasn't harmful, it is a public forum, and First Amendment protects that. Now, the remedies are broad, and with this, I talked about at the start that the history of this has to do with reporters. Well, the first one was the reporter who did the investigation of all the secret meetings in the 50s. The second one was when Steve Cooley was running for DA. I think it was about 2001. He was asked by a reporter, we don't think a lot of agencies are following the Brown Act. We think they're still skirting the rules. Will you enforce that with agencies that are violating? And he said, yeah, I open meetings is important, and that's the law, and I'll enforce it. So he got into office. In his first week, when he went through, he was going to try and keep his campaign promises. He asked his command staff, okay, can you give us our, Brown Act prosecution protocols? And they looked and they said, we don't have any. He goes, okay, well, why don't you bring me the previous prosecutions that has been done in this office? And they looked and they said, we've never done it. And so it was a bit of a sea change in LA County when he said, okay, that's not going to go on anymore. And so there is, I don't think they've done a prosecution, but they sent out letters that would have led to a prosecution if the legislative body for that agency didn't take immediate action. And those letters in and of themselves are effective because no council or commission wants to be seen as violating the Brown Act. They can and they would file a legislative body if action is taken in violation of the Brown Act. And the second part is key. It's intentional. And if you want some, this has only occurred one time in my time as city attorney, and it was a commission. And what they did was they had a subcommittee that was going to do a report, and it mattered. Subcommittees are valuable for commissions that have to work on things that take a great deal of time, and maybe only a couple of commission members have their schedule where they can devote that time. But it was of interest to all the commission members. And the correct way to do it is appoint 2 people. If there are different views on the commission, appoint someone from each of the different views. And then return to the commission. And then at that public meeting, in the packet, it can have their suggestions, and then they can all act on it and get to the point where you've developed a collective concurrence. Well, in that commission, what they did was they emailed each of the other members and said, hey, this is our draft. And then they took suggestions from the other members and they incorporated that into their final, recommendations. And so I had an assistant city attorney at the time who tried to stop them and said, you can't do that. And one of the commission members said, who's going to stop us, the Brown Act police? And at that point, my assistant city attorney, okay, well, I can't participate in this, and he left. And so I attended the next one, and this is why I have this presentation from the DA's office, because I had this presentation and I took a picture that they had of the Public Integrity Division. I said, okay, this is the Brown Act Police. And and if you pass this tonight without re-agendizing it, without making the public aware of how you get to this, and then consider it in a properly agendized meeting, then I'm going to my office and call the DA, because you're intentionally violating the Brown Act because of the Brown Act police comment. They complied. I didn't have to make the call, but a former commissioner wrote a blog about that, and you can find it if you search like city attorney Brown Act whistleblower. But it's important because not only is it the law, but it's how we ensure, at least in Redondo, that the public knows that things aren't done improperly behind closed doors. And so that's the only time that you would have a criminal violation. But short of that, you get a letter from the DA, or any member of the public can sue. It can, and it doesn't have to be that you've decided something. It just, if you can vote against the majority, but your participation in the legal meeting is sufficient, regardless of your position taken. The DA can file a civil lawsuit seeking injunctive and declaratory relief, as can any interested person. The other reason not to do it, aside from it's the law and undermining faith in government, is that everything you do can be undone if you don't do it following the Brown Act. Now, when I heard Chairman Morocco give the comment, you read your mission statement, I think that's great, because I think every commission should. Some commission members don't know exactly what is within their authority. And I would tell you to look at both your uniform the regulations that apply to all commissions, as well as the historical commission. In Redondo Beach, commissions used to be set out in the city charter. And then at one point in time, they felt that the commissions needed to be more responsive. There were some that should be combined. There's some that need to be expanded. And with a charter amendment, the voters have to approve it. So it's a more time-consuming process. And so they made it all within the Title II. And I'll point out things that have come up. The uniform regulations show up, the organization meetings, your procedure. But the one thing that came up in another commission is each member of a board or commission shall vote unless he or she states the reason for abstention for the record. So it's important if there's a vote, and it has to all be roll call vote while we're on Zoom, but you have to say you're voting yes, no, or if you're abstaining, you at least have to state a reason. I was asked to look that up because after the fact, they didn't know. The clerk's office, well, can that happen? Can we and in that case, the commissioner had stated, I don't know enough about this. I was not at the previous meeting. I don't feel that I can cast an informed decision. And that would be a valid reason, but you just have to give a reason. And again, those are what Commissioner Roca read, and make certain that if there's something that you want to do, I know you perform the volunteer services, and I know you're doing the video record of the history of the city. And after 27 years, I'm realizing that much of what I've done is in the history of the city, and human nature, it's slow to realize that. I was always think that's Pat Ost, and now I'm getting up to the point where Pat Ost was. But the other thing is to be an advisory body. So if you think that there's anything that, for example, I did not see it because it wouldn't necessarily affect my office, but every year the council does budget decisions. It goes through a budget process. It's a budget calendar. If there's something you think that the council should, some resource, some expenditure that you would think would help within your duties, you can weigh in on that. I know that the Morale House is something that commissioners have weighed in at various times. I'm excited to see the new roof on it because I haven't been out there recently, but make certain that you agendize and talk about things and advise the council members on what they should know. And that is my Brown Act presentation.
Thank you, City Attorney Webb. Is there any public comment, by the way, on the presentation?
There are no public comments for this item.
Great. Do any of the commissioners have any questions? This was for your benefit. I hope we didn't scare you all away, but we thought it was important for you to at least understand the parameters. Does any commissioners have any questions? Commissioner Klinger.
Yes, the presentation was really good. Is there a way that we can get it emailed to us?
Yeah, I'll send it to Cameron as soon as we're done with the meeting. Okay. Don't share it with other people because it's not mine. I've added some pieces to it, but it is the DA's and it was for presentation to you, so no problem. But hey, this is a presentation you should give. I want to be mindful of them allowing me to use it.
Is that a Golden Bears jersey that I'm seeing on you?
It's my son played football at Cal, so I have a lot. Even though I didn't attend Cal, you can see over my. I'm not sure which shoulder that is. I guess it's my left shoulder. I have his Cal helmet, which he's allowing me to keep, and I have my UCSB helmet. I tell them we're better. We haven't lost since 1992. Of course, we expanded the football league in 92, but we're still undefeated for almost 20 years.
Yep, I think we're signed.
Director Harding, you had a question?
Yeah, so for example, City Attorney Webb is going to send me the PowerPoint. If I want to forward that onto the commission, using your example of reply all being our enemy, is it still, kosher, I guess, to send something like that onto the full commission?
That's a good question. Yes, it is. You can communicate information to the commission members. Now, not if you tell them, information that you've gleaned from them. Now, the problem would be in that example, if you hit reply all, hey, I was looking at our mission statement and I think we should agendize this. If that came from a commission member, then that would be a problem. And so I just tell, new council members, new commission members, it's just avoid reply all, because a lot of times what we can have inadvertent violations because they'll put council member A plus 16, and they are responding to a member of the public who complained. Well, they didn't see in the 16 are two other council members that they often vote with. Well, now you've had a majority of the council because they expressed their opinion. Yeah, I think that's great, or I really like that. Well, that's a problem. It's a technical violation. And what we've done is we print that out, we include it in the agenda package, and we let everyone know. It's an inadvertent violation. It's not a problem. But that's why reply all is almost never a good idea. And if you hit reply all, make darn certain that you know that there aren't a majority, there isn't a quorum of the commission or the council when you do so.
Commissioner Russell, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, just a general question. Is this a statewide or countywide or federal act?
It's a California state act
State act.
Of the government code, and it was pretty much ignored because it was pretty much ignored up until 2001 when Cooley took over. I don't know what the new DA's policy is going to be on it, and he hasn't sent any directives out about that. But I would assume it would be in line of what Cooley and Jackie Lacey continue to, because it's a matter of interest to all of the public. And but it's a state law, but it's only as good as the enforcement that goes with it. And once the DA started sending out those nasty letters, things started getting different. I know from conversations with friends in that unit that they're not there now, but they said it wasn't so much cities, it was more school boards can do it. It would different entities, because a lot of them don't have their attorneys with them, and they would inadvertently violate it because no one was there to tell them they couldn't do it. So. Any other questions from any of the commissioners?
Yeah, I had a couple more slightly serious than the Golden Bear jersey. So my opinion doesn't really change. So let's say somebody comes up to me and asks me without telling me what any of the other commissioners think. They just ask me, did your opinion on issue X change from last meeting? Am I allowed to say nope? Or should I just go?
Well, you're allowed to say no. You're allowed to express your opinion. The problem is you can't control that person. And you could become part of that serial meeting when he goes and tells 3 of your other commissioners what you've said. So he goes to Commissioner 2 and 3, and then he tells Commissioner 4 what the 3 of you had said. And that's why it's better practice not to do so, because you could become part of that serial meeting because you can't control that intermediary. It happens more often when people have in other cities, it happens more often when people have a financial interest to do so. So you have a lobbyist or you have somebody who it stands to reason. They can go, hey, I've got the other 3 people. You're the deciding vote. You can make this happen, blah, blah, blah. They don't feel like they're going to be on their own. Or they can say, the Attorney General used it as an example in their materials that, on a 5-member city council, can I get your vote? Well, that's controversial. Yeah, but you would be the deciding vote. There are 2 people that said they support it and 2 people that say they don't. I really need your support. So you lose control of that once you express your opinion. But it's up to you. I just tend to I would prefer to play things close to the vest if it were me.
Got it. And then you mentioned that we could do joint fundraisers. Can you expand a little bit more on that?
You being a majority, all of you could be at the same fundraiser. If there's a fundraiser for the Morale House or some, you can all be there. You just can't talk about anything within the scope of your jurisdiction as a commission member. You can't have discussions about that. You can be separate. If you have a fundraiser, you can't afterwards when you're exhausted and you're kind of cleaning up afterwards, you can't say, wow, we made this. I think we can use it for, it goes against human nature. It just does. But that's part of what you're all called to, to discipline yourself to do, so that the public really has real-time input on it. And you see it every Tuesday on council meetings where if staff may recommend A, but when people show up to say how that would affect them, then they take that into consideration. And you want to have that formation, because people are, it can be hard to change our minds. If we think you may stick with it once you've committed to it, even maybe not be as open-minded to the opposite point of view. But if you have the public has an opportunity to change your mind when it will do good, that's what the intent of the Brown Act is all about.
And then the other, this is my last question. The other, I can already see Chairman Rocco smile at that. So the other thing that you brought up that I do want a little bit more clarification on is we have a lot of subcommittees on the Historical Commission, and you said that a subcommittee could somehow be bound by Brown Act, even if we don't talk to any of our other commissions.
Yeah, if it becomes a standing committee. So what I would say is, look at your committees and make them specific for, a specific project. Don't make it a continual. We always constantly have, X committee. Subcommittees really work well without the Brown Act when you're tasked with a specific mission. That you may have a lot of energy, and you may be at a point where you're able to spend a lot of time that you can't within the space of your meeting. You can do a lot of research, and you could do so with 2 other members of your commission. But if it is a standing committee, and you can if there are any questions, the chairman can communicate with me afterwards, and I'll take a look at that. That's been an issue with some committees and the commissions in the past, and I'd tell you, subcommittees are great for getting additional time and information and research done on the project. You just don't want it to be a standing committee.
That kind of goes into the point a bit, because every commission at some point is going to have a fundraising subcommittee. So like the way I'm kind of interpreting what you're saying is, as long as the fundraising subcommittee is geared towards a specific goal that's given to it by the commission and regulated by the commission, then it's not a standing subcommittee because it's geared towards that goal, correct?
Well, yeah, exactly. If you're raising money for, we're raising money for, we need to raise money for this project or this fundraiser, no problem. But you don't want to have, this is my 8th year on the fundraising committee, and it's, that's a standing committee at that point. So,
okay, I have now 4 questions. Just as Commissioner Klinger's clear, all of our committees are temporarily formed, and I expect at the end of the year we'll be evaluating again what we've accomplished and figuring out whether we want to continue on with them for the projects that they're doing. But I had 3 questions regarding the operations of this commission. So you heard with the consent calendar, I asked if there were any objections versus not taking a roll call vote on every single matter. Is there a preference on it, on non-controversial, or does it matter if I save it only for items with the letter J in front of it?
So that won't soon matter, because it only applies to the governor's emergency order. So the technical answer is that every vote requires a roll call vote because we're on Zoom. Now the mayor sometimes deviates from it if it's a really minor, motion to approve the blue foldered items, any objection to it. That's not technically correct, but I'm not certain exactly why. I'd be speculating, but the governor did say that each vote must be done by a roll call vote. I would certainly do it on any substantive item.
Okay. The second question, as the chair, I'm always worried about a quorum. So if I call every commissioner up and say, you're coming to the meeting, or you're coming to the meeting so we can do business, is that technically a Brown Act issue?
No, it's not a Brown Act issue. And even if you were calling a special meeting, you can actually communicate with each other on whether to call a special meeting. So there are exceptions to that. It deals with the substance of what you're doing. So no, that's not a violation.
And the third thing is our one of our marching orders is to perform voluntary services at the Redondo Beach Museum. In the past, they've actually had work days at the museum, which obviously we're covering the topic because we're all working and talking to each other about the things that we're looking at. Is that one of those exceptions too that you mentioned?
So I need more information. And when you like, are you saying multiple? You're all working there. You're talking about the
documents we're going through and where should we put it, and is this something that we really need to preserve in a better way than it is, or hey, we have something we want to move to a different location in the museum. It's all part of our volunteer workday. It's consistent with our mission, but
I have to think about that. Let me perhaps give some guidelines. That's more specific, and I don't want to give you something that's unworkable so that you can't get your mission accomplished. And let me think about that.
Okay. Any other questions for our city attorney? Okay, well, I want to thank you for coming to us today. You're welcome to stick around and watch our subcommittee reports to make sure we're complying with the spirit of what we just learned. And hopefully we didn't lose any commissioners or our new director about all this stuff that's relevant.
So I didn't mean to scare anybody, but it's more important to say, to take it seriously and what could go wrong. But I just wanted to, I won't stick around because I'm haven't had dinner yet, and I'm going to take care of that. But I do want to thank you for your service, because commissions and in the time that I've spent in the city, they've done remarkable things. And I know the council values your input tremendously. And thank you for the time that you're devoting to the community and your volunteer, especially that you're the one committee, I think, in the commission that signs up in advance for doing volunteer work. So aside from your commission duties. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we need a motion to receive and file this staff report?
City clerk, I believe that would be the next step, yes, but I'll verify with the city clerk's office. Okay,
why don't we just, is there a motion to receive the report that the staff did on the Brown Act?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, now I guess we have to do a roll call vote on this since it's an item J. So please do a roll call.
Sure. Commissioner Klinger?
Aye.
Commissioner Warstadt?
Aye.
Commissioner Zaremski?
Aye.
Commissioner Russell?
Aye.
Commissioner Pepper? Commissioner Fernandez? And Chair Morocco?
Aye. Okay, so we're now on to item J2. And I think what we got out of that last presentation is important to get written reports to the staff so it shows up in the materials that's sent out to the community. So if we do need to take some action, we can actually do more than just refer and file. So we're moving on to J2, which is the Historical Commission Subcommittee reports. And Director Harding, do you want to key it up? Do you want me to just take over and go through each of the committees?
Probably best for you, Chair, since this being my first meeting, I'm not entirely familiar with the process. So
okay. So why don't we start? Are there any public comments on our subcommittee reports?
There are no public comments.
Okay. We only received one written report, and that was on the path of history. So I'm going to go through the list of committees and see if there are any oral reports to be delivered, and at the end of that process, we'll just receive and file those other reports, and then we'll deal with the path of history. So oral history, I'm on that committee. We're continuing to interview people for the oral history project. As you heard, City Attorney Webb is going to be one of the people in the upcoming months that we're going to get an oral history of. I think I've done about 16 now, and it's a lot of fun just to get to know the people. So that's the oral report for the oral history report. Joint fundraising, is there an oral report? Mr. Commissioner Klinger?
Yes, there is. Thank you. So the subcommittee has met. We have an agenda that we are currently working through. And I don't know if Commissioner Warstad wants to go over some of the items that she covered or not.
Sure, why not?
Go for it.
So what I have done is I have reached out and contacted Jacob with Parks and Rec, and he is on board to help us with recognizing and registering the Wilderness Park with the state of California as a historical landmark. So we had a very nice conversation regarding that. Going forward, I am still going to give him the template for the email letter to reach out to all of the highlighted items that we went over in the subcommittee, meaning the state parks, and well, there's a whole list. I think everybody has that, do they?
No.
No? Okay. Also, I have had conversation with Barbara Epstein, same thing with the Recs and Parks, and also Parkland Conservancy. They just want to join us in like the tri-committees with the library, Recs and Park. And the question was brought up by Jacob V. At what point could we bring in the Public Arts Commission, and if we can?
So, as Commissioner Warstead mentioned briefly, we are reaching out to the others commission. She reached out to Parks and Recs. Commissioner Fernandez, who is not here, has been reaching out to Library Commission. Potentially, Commissioner Warstead is also going to reach out to Public Parks and Rec, along with to Public Arts, along with Commissioner Rodriguez. They're both. Commissioner Rodriguez has worked with the joint fundraising subcommittee before as a Parks and Recs commissioner, and that would also include us, Commissioner Arata from Parks and Recs. I have been had a previous discussion with Council Member Narenheim, whose notes I found about it, and also I believe Commissioner Warstead reached out to the Chewinga Indians, Native Americans. And Commissioner Fernandez is looking into the history of the Nike missile sites, and I'm looking through other historical archives to see how else we can document it. And the Conservancy is also going to help us acquire the written and cited history of Hopkins Wilderness Park, and that's where Barbara Epstein, that Commissioner Warstead mentioned, came in. So that's a brief rundown of the Joint Fundraising Commission oral report. The only motion here is to receive and file.
Okay, we'll do that at the end of the process. You actually cleared up something. I was watching the Recs and Parks Commission, and this Jacob person said he was working with the Historical Commission, and both the director and the former director looked confused. Please keep them in the loop if you're going to be working with anybody else on the other commissions. The chair of the Recs and Parks Commission wasn't aware that you reached out to them either, and it's just a nice courtesy so that at least your staff people know that you're reaching out to other commissions, and it keeps them at least in the loop. And but I appreciate the information and the work that you guys have done on this. It sounds like you're moving it forward. Any other questions?
I will speak to Commissioner Rodriguez about the reaching out to the staff and keeping them in the loop. And I saw the chair was, I think the only reason the chair might not have been in the loop is because of the Brown Act. violation because we might end up requiring another person from Parks and Recs. We already have Commissioners Rodriguez and Arata. And so if they notify the chair, that might be coming close to a Brown Act breach potentially. So I believe that's why the chair was not notified. Perhaps that's an issue that you and I can discuss as the Brown Act bodies of how to make sure that the chair is in the loop, because I agree with that's really important, but also not to break the Brown Act.
When we did the, for the historical murals, we actually did a formal presentation to the Recs and Parks and asked for their consent. And the same thing with public arts, we're actually asking for a formal presentation. So again, you need to coordinate with your director and your, with regards to how you're doing it, so they just don't get all of a sudden at a meeting, somebody makes a comment and they're completely out of the loop with regards to what's going on. But I do appreciate all the work you guys are doing and moving this forward.
All right, well, I will definitely convey that to Commissioner Rodriguez. I just don't want to step on anybody's toes in Parks and Recs. I just rather have the commissioners coordinate their own commissions rather than micromanaging it. But yes, I will definitely make the conveyance, and thank you for watching other commission meetings. So then moving on to the...
Wait, so that's the joint fundraising report. Any other questions on the joint fundraising report? Okay, let's move on then to the museum fundraising report.
Museum fundraising report.
That's the next one on the list.
Oh, no report for that one.
Okay, traveling museum?
Yes, I believe Commissioner Russell and I met and we've discussed a little bit, and we helped move it forward. I do have two announcements to make. I believe Commissioner Russell is going to be giving the next subcommittee report on this topic. And I believe Commissioner Russell also has a motion that I will convey that he wanted to discuss about that subcommittee. So the motion specific to that is, and please let me know if it's a bit confusing or if I have to clarify it, but initially when the Traveling Museum Subcommittee was empowered by the Historical Commission, it was basically limited to K-12 Redondo residents, so those who are in the Redondo school system. The students, Commissioner Russell has conveyed to me some great ideas on how we can make it a little bit more efficient as a subcommittee if we extend the program to include all Redondo residents, not just the K-12 Redondo residents. So the motion is to extend the program to include all Redondo residents rather than just K-12 Redondo residents. And Commissioner Russell, let me know if you want to say anything about that.
Nothing, set in stone as far as a plan or anything like that, but I think we were just talking about all of the potential applications that a traveling museum could be kind of approached from, and so we were just talking about other potential opportunities outside of K through 12, and so just wanted to bring that up to the committee that we may look at exploring things outside of, like, specifically within the schools.
Okay.
No details beyond that at this point.
Can I make a suggestion, since it would have been helpful to have a written report so that we knew what you were doing, but it sounds like you're still in the exploratory process and it sounds like you are still working on a plan. May I suggest you just create your plan and bring it to the next commission meeting if you need us to actually vote on that. If you need to include that in the plan, then that would be an appropriate venue to do that. But I think there's no clear pathway. And if you're just asking for our permission, I don't know if you are asking for our permission, but it's something that it sounds like you already have that under control and you just need to make your plan.
Well, the only thing that the motion will do is it'll move the audience from K-12 Redondo residents to all Redondo residents. But if you'd rather see that motion as part of a written out plan, I believe that we can come back with a written out plan and that motion for our next meeting, and then I can withdraw it.
Director Harding, do you have any thoughts?
I think I would agree with the chair. I think seeing what the plan is and having a better understanding of, working with the end goal in mind, I think would be helpful. I think opening it up to all Redondo residents is a great idea, but I think there's a lot of, details and logistics probably involved in that. You guys have probably discussed that already, but it would be good for both me and the rest of the commission to see something in writing and get a better understanding of that. So, it's up for the rest of the commission to decide, but that would be my 2 cents, Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Russell, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, we can definitely do that and put it as a formal motion. I think we were also kind of just discussing, in the initial kind of creation of this subcommittee, was it even defined as something specifically through K through 12, or is that just kind of the direction that
it was defined specifically?
It was okay. So I think that's where it was. Is that it was, since it was defined, and since we had other ideas, do we need to then come up with a motion to expand how it was defined into all the? So if that is the case, then we can definitely do that. And
I think if you come back with your plan, I think you'll find us very supportive of it, given what the concept is. But I think also, if I'm remembering what the Traveling Museum is doing, one of the things we're going to be talking about later is the reopening of the museum, which you will then ultimately need some of the pieces there. So it may actually, once we hear from staff about what's going to go on with the reopening of the museum, we can actually, or you guys and the commission on the committee can actually come up with a plan that interacts with what we know is going to be allowed from the perspective of the city.
So then our direction from you, Chair Morocco, is to formulate a plan going forward with this, and that we would find the commission to be very supportive.
Yes, and I would again strongly recommend to put a written report together so that the staff at least is aware of it. And if you have any action items that need us to take action, it will be formulated very clear so it's easy for us to have the discussion and take action.
Okay, in that case, I will withdraw the motion and bring it back to you in a written form in the August meeting. I mean, we will withdraw the motion and bring it back to you in the August meeting.
Okay. The path of history we'll talk about at the end of the committee because that one's a written report. Moment of history, there's nothing to report. The next one is Commissioner Fernandez's one to do. Budget. So I did talk to Budget and Finance, a Budget and Finance Commissioner who used to be on the Historic Commissioner about creating an opportunity for Commissioner Fernandez to work with him and to learn the process. So then when next year's budget comes up, we're actually in line to make the request. I think the city is actually passed already on the point of where they're going to be done with the budget before we even had any input on it. So hopefully he will be able to connect up with Commissioner Conroy, who is the person, and be able to learn the process so that we can be well represented in the process. Okay, so technology and website, is there, I think that's Commissioner Russell, he's the only one here on that.
Yeah, no meeting or update.
Okay. Historical murals, as noted in the minutes, Commissioner Rada of the Wrexham Parks is our liaison on it. I did get a notice from Chair Lappin of the Public Arts Commission. We've approached her and she said she was going to approach former interim director Koike about being on the agenda on July 28th. And it sounds like Commissioner Klinger may want to also be talking to them about being on their agenda as well to explain their concept for the item as well. So that's on the historical mural.
Chair Morocco, if I may, I just wanted to let you know that I did pass along the information to Director Harding, an email about possible items that he would like to include in the next commission meeting for the public arts. And
Okay.
the items.
Okay, and Commissioner Klinger, if you have anything that you want him, Director Harding, to consider for that agenda, you need to reach out to him directly. Okay, writing competitions and scholarship, there's nothing going on with that at this point. It's just a wishful project at this point. Pitch, I don't know what, we had talked initially about Leadership Redondo. I don't know what their project is this time around, but they would have already picked it. So well, if you have any thoughts or idea of projects that you want to do that has a volunteer group that we can go to, like one of the service clubs or whatever, please bring that back either as a staff recommendation at the end of the meeting, or just send it off to Director Harding so that we don't violate all this Brown Act stuff, and he can share it and decide if to put it on our next agenda as well. Marketing, there's nothing going on. I don't know, Director Harding, if you want to talk about reopening the museum at this point, or do you want to, because it is marketing and we have to figure out how to market it, do you want to wait to your director's report, or do you want to wait to staff? I'm inclined to wait to your report to hear what you have to tell us now that the governor has lifted some certain of the restrictions.
Yeah, I can wait till the director's report.
Okay. Museum improvement. So you have, and to the extent that Director Koike hasn't shared it with Director Harding, we did attach to our minutes a couple of meetings ago about a thing called the Clara report and the Eller report that talks about the museum improvements that are proposed to go on. We haven't formalized it onto the agenda at this point for further discussion, but now that you're on board, just be aware that a couple years ago, they spent several $1,000s to develop this project of how to make the museum much more popping on it. And so that's out there. So if you need any direction on where to find it, I'm happy to get that to you. And finally, we get to the Path of History and virtual Path of History. You do have a written report in your materials. If you recall at our April meeting, we had a discussion about whether we wanted the committee to make the recommendations initially as to things in North Redondo, or do we just want to have a whole open discussion about it? And the recommendation was to actually take it to the committee first. You had a comment, Commissioner Klinger, before I get going?
Oh, no, not on that.
Okay, so in your report, we listed 10 places in addition to the 3 that we approved at the last meeting where we'd like to see a Path of History marker placed. We were hoping that we'd get some public feedback. As far as I know, we haven't received any, but they're in the report. Pier Avenue Marketplace, in 1940 fireworks explosion location, some of the oil derricks and rigs, Our Lady of Guadalupe Church on the Redondo side, the TRW tract, Perry Park, a little bit about Congressman Glenn Anderson at Anderson Park, Perry Park, the Grant School and Grant School District, which predates Redondo Union District, and then the South Bay Center / Galleria. Those were what we came up with as a committee to add to the Path of History project. As noted in the committee report, we've asked as an action item to approve these 10 North Redondo's locations as part of the project. So I'm hoping for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Okay, there's a motion by Commissioner Russell. Is that a second, Commissioner Klinger?
Yes.
Commissioner Zaremski, you look confused. Did you want to say something?
I agree.
Okay. Is there any public comment on this?
There's no public comment for this item.
Okay. And is there any discussion from anybody? Okay. So Since it's moved and seconded, there's no discussion. If we can have a roll call vote on adding the 10 locations that are in the Path of History Committee report to the Path of History project.
Of course. Commissioner Klinger. Aye. Commissioner Warstadt.
Aye.
Commissioner Zaremski.
Aye.
Commissioner Russell.
Aye.
Commissioner Pepper. Commissioner Fernandez. And Chair Morocco.
Aye. So thank you. We'll get those added to the 25, I think, that are already there. The second action item. So if you recall at the last meeting, we had some city birthday signs that were made up. We put one over at the Historical Museum. That sign is still standing. And we put one in front of General Omar Park. That sign went down within the first weekend, but they left the sign there, so I put it back up and I made it another 2 weeks. But from what I've seen from the sign that's at the Historical Museum, it's actually, people are stopping and looking at it. When I take my walks, I tend to walk by it. So I thought, you know what if we, as part of the project, create Path of History markers? And in your materials, I've created a kind of a mock-up of a sign. As with the other signs, I'm going to front the cost of it because it would take a long while to make it through the city. So I was going to put up about at least 6 of the signs at the places that, with Director Cameron's Harding's approval, put up them at the locations, possible locations for where we put these signs, and that would be a fundraising opportunity. So hopefully you had a chance to see what the sign looks like, kind of similar to the last one. And so as an action item, I ask that the commission approve the production of lawn signs and work with the community services director for placement. Can I have a motion on that? Okay, nobody seems to want to make a motion on it.
I'll make a motion on it.
Thank you, Commissioner Russell. Is there a second? Is that Commissioner Warstadt? Is there a discussion or any questions? I'm feeling some reluctance. Commissioner Zaremski, you're giving me another look of confusion.
I think you're reading my facial expressions.
That's what we get to do in Zoom. Okay, is there any discussion? Any comments? Okay, can we get a roll call vote on putting up lawn signs consistent with that motion?
Sure. Commissioner Klinger.
Aye.
Commissioner Warstadt.
Aye.
Commissioner Zaremski.
Aye.
Commissioner Russell.
Aye.
Commissioner Pepper. Commissioner Fernandez. And Chair Morocco.
Aye. Okay, so the next parts of this report don't really require any commission action. Wanted to tell you that we did locate from the prior staff person that was involved in the project the content for the Vincent Park Path of History marker. We are going to be talking at our next committee meetings about how to go about writing a plan for each marker. And I guess at this point it's a good interjection for staff to, do we have any information about whether the CIP person is going to release the funds that we voted to be released?
I'm not aware of anything. Lori, are you?
Chair, I think there's some follow-up on staff's end because I believe the CIP manager asked for some information and you provided some background information, correct?
Correct.
And your conversations with Hunt Design. So we need to do a little bit of follow-up. But I don't, I believe you still need some funding though to complete one sign?
We are actually only asking for the design work on one of the signs. That's what the motion was, and that one has been fully funded. And I assume you don't know if the CIP person has actually contacted Hunt Design to talk to them about a contract?
That I don't know, as Director Harding mentioned, we're still knee deep in budget. So I will get with Director Harding and give him a little bit more background information, and he can speak with the CIP manager.
Okay. And then the last bit of business, which we are actually asking for the commission to discuss conceptually, is we have a website that's for the Historical Commission. There's certain content on it. As we discussed at the prior meeting, the director has the discretion to change the signs. And in the report, I've actually asked for 3 different things with regards to putting pictures of markers that we prioritized in the meeting, in the April meeting, have a page that illustrates out the previous installed marker, which is consistent with what we were trying to bring up, a virtual thing where you click on a sign and it'll take you to the marker that's physically out there, and then a list of all future signs with a small blurb. As you can see, it's really up to the discretion of the staff to allow us to do that, but conceptually, that's where I'd like to take the project next, and I wanted to share that with you to get some comments and some staff comments. And I know that one of the committees on the website is actually at some point going to talk about ultimately coming up with some sort of policy, but I want to at least tell you what's out there. Okay, any comments on that? Okay, so can I get a motion to receive and file all of the committee reports that we talked about?
Motion to receive and file oral and written subcommittee reports.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Russell, okay. Any further discussion?
I had one quick question. I don't know if this kind of backs up to the Traveling Museum subcommittee, but did we or did somebody have some sort of Excel file with all of the Redondo Beach artifacts listed out available to us?
That is a yes and no answer. Since I've been on the commission, I've been trying to confirm what the inventory is. The former chair of the commission, Arata, who's now on Recs and Parks, provided some information with regards to that. We haven't been in the museum to verify anything. And on top of it, supposedly there's some information in an old computer that's probably at least 10 to 15 years old. So I don't even know if it's, it could be on Quattro for all we know, or an earlier version on. So until we actually get into the museum, we're not going to be able to tell you what's there. There is on the city website kind of an illustration of what's in the museum. And that may give you at least some basic stuff on it. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you that one of the things we're going to be talking about probably in the next several months is what do we do with the Palmer collection, which I'm not sure after what happened the last time with the collections of prehistoric rocks, whether that's going to be one of those things that will be carved out that we have to actually keep in one place. So that'll be coming up, but that's nothing. Once you come up with your plan for the traveling history, that can be something that we can approach. But once we get the facts straight on that.
To Commissioner Russell's point, we did have a partial list of it. And one of the reasons that the traveling museum is a great idea is because the majority of the artifacts that we have are actually not on display at the historical museum because we have a limited amount of space and quite a few artifacts. So just wanted to bring that up.
Where are these artifacts kept at?
I believe that, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they're kept in the museum storage or in the library storage.
Okay, well, maybe the staff will figure out where the library storage is and where the museum storage is. I know we have something at the Performing Arts Center. I've seen that, but it doesn't have really many artifacts other than a bunch of old signs. And I do have pictures which I can share with you, Commissioner Klinger, that I shared with our previous community services manager about what was up there, and it's hard to access. But I don't think anybody's been in there either to look for this stuff.
I know that there have been.
Oh, go ahead, Elia. Sure.
I know that there have been quite a few issues in storage at the historical museum, like I believe in the drawers and then probably upstairs. Not sure about how extensive the library storage is. I've only heard about it in passing, but I do know it exists. Sorry, go ahead, Colin.
Well, maybe that's one thing in your staff recommendations you can ask the director to check into. Because that's news to me. I know you can't get into the attic of the museum because it is bolted closed. So if you have any information, you need to share it with the director so that he at least is aware of what our inventory is.
Well, it came from Tyke during one of my museum tours. So Tyke was the docent of the museum that kept it open part-time until COVID hit.
Okay, again, I would strongly recommend you talk to Director Harding so that he's aware of what it is. I know they checked out Franklin Park because there was a concern that there was stuff in there, and Director Koike verified that there was nothing there. So if you think there are things in location, we're going to talk about the presidential letter when we get to staff recommendations. Please share with the Director Harding. He knows exactly where our inventory is at. Okay, so there is a motion still on the floor to receive and file. Are there any other comments? Okay, so since it's been moved in second, can we get a roll call vote on the receiving and filing the written and oral reports?
Sure. Commissioner Klinger.
Aye.
Commissioner Warstadt.
Aye.
Commissioner Zaremski.
Aye.
Commissioner Russell.
Aye.
Commissioner Pepper. Commissioner Fernandez. And Chair Morocco.
Aye. Okay, so now we move on to the director's report.
Thank you,
Chair. The motion passes.
Thank you, Chair. With me still being so new, I don't have much for you tonight. In regards to reopening the museum, I have had preliminary talks with staff on not just the museum, but all facilities, whether it be the Performing Arts Center, Perry Park, Anderson, Alta Vista. As you're all aware, the guidelines just relaxed last, what was that, Tuesday? And so we're still, as a staff, wrapping our heads around that and figuring out how we're going to reopen and do it in the safest way possible. So I don't have a date for you tonight as to when the museum will reopen, but I can tell you that we're working towards it as in order to make that happen as soon as possible. And I will be sure to let the commission know when that is as soon as we are able to firm up a date. But again, with me being so new and still figuring things out and wrapping my head around things, that's about all I have for you tonight.
Just an additional note, Director Harding and I talked about this. Director, remember the reminder to the commission about how the city handles volunteers? Remember that conversation?
No.
I know. I've had a few things to think about in 3 weeks. We just touched base briefly with our human resources department, because I certainly was never worked with volunteers at the museum. And so just to remind everyone that in planning for the future, if you do decide to move forward with volunteering at the museum, that the process is just like really any other hiring of any other employee at the city. It's, you know, your background, your live scan, you know, it's, you know, very in depth. So we treat you just like an employee, except you don't get paid. So you're a volunteer. So just keep that in mind, because it does take time. It's could be a fairly lengthy process, especially if you have other hirings for personnel here. So just wanted to remind you about that.
So it's like being a camp counselor at one of the city camps. You basically could do that same background information and all that stuff.
That's the whole process. And then again, you'll have to think about how to handle keys and codes, because I don't believe volunteers, you and I, Chair, talked about this. You know, you have to kind of factor that in also as to how you're going to staff the museum.
Okay. And Director Harding, just so you know, at the last meeting, Commissioner Zaremski volunteered to help come up with some coordinated plan with regards to reopening. She and I talked about maybe at least volunteering one session of a couple hours, so that at least it could be partially reopened if you have no other alternatives. I don't have a problem doing that background check. I assume Commissioner Zaremski shouldn't either, given her job. But
No problem.
yeah, so you at least have 2 volunteers at this point, and you do have a good resource person in Commissioner Zaremski to at least bounce off some of the ideas. Did I state that okay? Okay, good. Okay, it is kind of important to get it open, but we understand that the city has its issues that it needs to work through. Okay, any other comments or questions for the director?
I just had one more. Has there been any discussion about in-person meetings, commission meetings?
Okay, that's a good one. I think it's on at least one of the other commissions that said it was on the agenda for the next meeting. Yeah, and even on ours for adjournment. So that's a good question.
Yeah, I can try and answer that. I know this has come up at the council level and several other commissions. We are still in the midst of doing some major upgrades to council chambers. And some of those upgrades include technology upgrades. So I think those are to be completed hopefully within the next few weeks. And then there's a training component to all the new technology. Not only for the staff, but also for the commissioners, the council members, everybody. So I don't have a firm date as to when we'll be back. I think your next meeting is August. Hopefully we'll be back in person by that meeting, but it'll depend on the completion of the project and making sure everybody gets trained and up to speed on the new technology in council chambers.
Okay. Did that answer your question, Commissioner Russell?
It did.
Okay. Any other questions for the director on the director's report? Okay. Well, thank you, Director Harding. We'll now move into the member items and referral to staff. And as I go through, I'll start with Commissioner Worstadt, since you're the highest up on my Zoom screen. Do you have any member items or referrals to staff that you want to bring up at this time?
Not at this time.
Okay. Commissioner Klinger, you're next up.
Yes. So as was briefly mentioned, and I'll reach out to you about this via email, but possibly check out some of the potential storages for historical museum artifacts. And I believe, as Chair Morocco mentioned, we have been trying to find the rather elusive president's letter. Maybe if you can have Commissioner Zaremski and Chair Morocco volunteer to help you locate it, that would help, if that would help. And I'm willing to volunteer for that or for the historical museum as well. I can also do a fairly complicated background check. So that's pretty much my referral. Thank you.
Commissioner Zaremski, you're next up. Any member referrals or staff referrals to staff?
Not at this time.
Okay, Commissioner Russell.
Not at this time, except just one. If we do hear that the museum opens up or something like that, are we able to go visit and then bring up topics related to the Historical Commission with the staff there? I assume that's not any sort of Brown Act.
That's the question that I actually left with City Attorney Webb. The last time we all met at the museum was when we were working with the consultant on how we wanted to upgrade the museum. So I think that would be a wonderful thing if we had an opportunity for all of us to tour the museum. I've actually offered Director Harding to have an opportunity to go walk through with him on it. But if City Attorney Webb says there's no problem with it, it's within our mandate. It's also what historically they've done. We used to meet as a commission at the museum. Then that hopefully will happen. But yeah.
Cool. That was it for me.
Okay. So I've got several items on it, and I'm gonna, just so you know, Director Harding, I usually work from the minutes of the previous meeting about open items just so they don't fall off completely out of the universe. So the first item is Commissioner Klinger asked that, and there's a comment in the staff member things that we'd append those 3 articles and the draft letter to the minutes. We have not received physical copies of those items yet, so I'm just reminding them that we still need to get the 3 articles and the template letter.
I believe it was emailed right away.
Yeah, Chair Morocco, I emailed them like the day after or the night of.
Okay, well then I didn't get them. Okay, great.
And I wouldn't have them anymore because of
30 days.
the retention. So
Okay. And I think Commissioner Klinger already mentioned the presidential letter. Director Harding, if you need a picture of it, I think I have somewhere in my old pictures, a picture of the 5 letters. The staffing in the museum, we talked about. That. There was mentioned in one of the things I think from former Chair Arata about waterproof containers. And when we do get into the museum, we need to look at the lighting. We need to look at whether there's old documents are left on the floor levels because they were in the past have been flooded. And we need to also look at our computer and see if we can at least find something to upgrade it, because I think it's really stale. And those are my items on the list. Oh, and the last one is business cards. So I've now been on this commission for 3 years, and we've been promised business cards. We signed a release on it. We're still not having any business cards. I don't know, Commissioner Klinger may have actually.
I do.
Oh, he's got them. So I guess, but when I go around talking to people about doing oral histories, it's really nice to give them something that says that I'm legitimate and that you can talk to me rather than giving them a card that I made up. So even if it doesn't have an email address on it, it would still be bonus. So if you can at least talk to the city clerk about whether she would release some sort of business card to our commissioners so that we can do commission business as we need to.
I can look through some of mine and give them to you. You can hand them out on my behalf.
Cross them out, yeah.
No, you can hand them out on my behalf. I always wanted a secretary who wore a suit all the time.
Okay. Okay, so are there any other staff referrals to staff or member items? Okay, hearing none. Can I get a motion to adjourn as soon as I say that the next meeting of the Historical Commission will be a regular meeting held at 7 p.m. on August 18, 2021, and it's either going to be at the Redondo Beach City Council chambers at 415 Diamond Street, Redondo Beach, or it will be on a Zoom format, which you will find out from the city when they publish our next agenda for the meeting. All agenda packets are available 24 hours at www.redondo.org under the City Clerk tab. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
And can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, might as well do a roll call.
Okay. Commissioner Klinger.
Aye.
Commissioner Warstadt.
Aye.
Commissioner Zaremski. Commissioner Russell.
Aye.
And Chair Morocco.
Aye. Okay, so we stand adjourned. Thank you very much for attending, and thank you all for all the work you do.
Thank you.